Hello everyone, Jacquie Edwards here. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm talking about rent to rent and deal sourcing and whether you should have those in the same company. Now, I know a lot of people are really interested in rent to rent. Of course, it's awesome. I love it. Yeah. But another great strategy that goes really well with rent to rent is deal sourcing. Now, they both have kind of a lower startup capital than most of the other property investing strategies, which is why I think a lot of people start looking at them together. And honestly, they just go really well hand in hand together. So, you're out there looking for rent to rent deals, and, maybe you find some different deals or you find something that's not quite suitable for you. A great strategy then is to just source those on to other people because that doesn't make a good deal for you doesn't mean it's not a good deal for somebody else. So you can go out there and kind of look for deals all over, keep the best ones for yourself, and pass other ones on to other people. So great strategies that work together really well and can make you a good profit. Now, what do you do kind of company structure wise? Do you do them both in the same company, or should you have two separate companies, one for rent to rent and one for deal sourcing? Now, this is really only relevant if you have limited companies set up. Because if you're doing this as a sole trader, then it's all under your name anyways. So you can definitely have two different names for your companies if you're doing it as a sole trader, but all the risk, all the liability, all the bookkeeping, it's all going to be under your kind of name and your tax situation anyways. So if you're a sole trader, it doesn't matter. Don't really worry about this video, whatever. Now, if you're planning on moving into a limited company or you've already got a limited company, this is where it starts to matter, whether you should have your rent to rent and deal sourcing business together or keep them separate. So, the key thing is liability. Rent to rent and deal sourcing have slightly different profiles. And the key reason for having a limited company, in my opinion, is it limits your liability. Limited liability company limits your personal liability. So anything that happens inside that company, if it goes bankrupt, if it loses all their money, if the company gets sued, they can't come after your personal assets. Now, and that's why you want to set up a limited company, likely. Now, if you have them both in the same company, the risk is that if something goes wrong in your deal sourcing business or if something goes wrong in your rent to rent business and you get sued. So let's say a tenant in your rent to rent business falls down the stairs, they break their neck, they're paralyzed for life. Really horrible situation, very unlikely to happen, but let's just say worst case scenario. Now they're going to sue everybody if possible. They're going to sue the landlord, they're going to sue you, and this is going to be just a huge stressful time. Now, let's say they win, and now your rent to rent company has to pay them £300,000 damages. If your deal sourcing business is in the same company as your rent to rent business, they'll be able to take the profits from your deal sourcing business and your rent to rent business to pay back that lawsuit, to pay back those damages, to do anything. They'll be able to claim against both of them. If your deal sourcing business is a separate limited company from your rent to rent business, then if you have any problems in your rent to rent business, they can't touch your deal sourcing business as long as you run everything properly and keep them separate. So that's probably the biggest benefit. And this is only if you see that kind of risk as being a big risk. Now, some of us might say, that's what's the risk of that happening, or what's the risk of something that big happening, and it's pretty low. Now, especially in the beginning, you probably can do everything all in one company. If you do everything all in one company, your life is 100 times easier because all of your bookkeeping is in one company. You only have to file one set of annual accounts. It's just a lot easier to keep track of one company than to keep track of two. Because once you have two companies, now all of a sudden you have to have two sets of bookkeeping, two sets of annual accounts. You have to have more bank statements, more bank accounts. You're just keeping track of things a lot more. So there's a lot more admin involved. And if the risk of kind of loss and liability is super low, then it probably isn't worth that extra admin in the beginning. Now, once your businesses start growing and things are scaling up, then it might be worth looking at, let's see, is it time to separate these businesses out? do I have my systems really well in my rent to rent property? Am my systems in my deal sourcing business going really well? Do I have quite a lot of revenue coming through both of them? Is it getting to be harder to track everything together than it would be if I separated them all out? Again, in the beginning, when you've got one company, you have only one time that you have to apply for property ombudsman and the redress scheme and data protection. So you only need to apply for those once. Once you split it out into two separate companies, then both of those companies need to have their own ombudsman registration, redress scheme, data protection. So you start paying those fees and doubling up on that admin as well when you separate the companies out. So it's not the biggest deal in the world, especially once you're starting to make some money. Maybe you've got an admin assistant or bookkeeper that can help you do all of these things. So again, once you've grown, then it's probably time to really look at, let's do these companies separately. Another time you might want to do them separately is if you have different people working with you. So maybe you've got, a business partner in your deal sourcing business, and they're not going to really be doing rent to rent. Well, then you probably wouldn't want them to have them on a director as in your rent to rent business when they're not helping with any of that. They're not doing any of that. They're not sharing any of that profit. You'd want to keep that separate. So, if there's different people helping you and managing the different companies, then you'd probably want to have separate limited companies for them to just keep everything separate. So again, if one of your directors does something crazy and fraudulent and start stealing money from the company or from the tenants or whatever it is, and you've got them involved in both of your companies, then, both of your companies are going to struggle and have lots of issues. Whereas if you've got those companies separate, then they're completely separate legally, they're different legal entities, and one company won't impact the other company. So really think through, what is your personal situation? What is the risk in your business? In your rent-to-rent business, what's the risk in your deal sourcing business? Who's helping you in them? What are you doing there? And, do you have the capacity to do the extra admin? Or is it worth just waiting right now, having everything in one company, getting everything set up, running, and focus on getting your business set up? Because the more time you spend focused on, legals and admin and setting up new companies and bookkeeping, is less time you have to be out there doing deals. So there is no legal requirement that says you have to have them in separate companies. You can totally legally have them in the same company. That's fine. So it's just kind of a personal decision based on what your situation is. So those are my thoughts on it. Have a read through the blog as well, just to kind of go through it one more time, see pros and cons in a bit more detail, but really think about, what is your risk and what is the benefit of, splitting it up into two different companies versus having it in one company. And are you at the point now in your business where it makes sense to split them up, or should you wait a little while, get focused, build the business up, and then split them after? Because that's the one thing, you can always change it later. You can start as a sole trader now, move them all into one limited company in 6 months, 12 months time. And then maybe in 36 months, you want to split the companies apart. You can totally do that. You don't have to do it all now. So a lot of people are like, oh, start the way you mean to go on. But you don't know what you need from, a $0 business up to all of a sudden now you have, $100,000 or £300,000 business. So just start with where you're at. Keep it super simple and know that anytime you want, you can split that up and move your business structure differently. All right, so thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.